that little gel pack inside this little container, which is my face, this isn't Joel, and neither is all this. This carries Joel around, and this part speaks for Joel. Joel is this little gel pack. Everything that makes me me, my interpretation of God, my interpretation of you, in and up, down and out, goes through the little gel pack. My soul, my memories, my personality, everything that defines me is determined by my brain. That's why the Bible is constantly addressing the heart of the man, which is often the brain, is what that means, or the brain itself. I don't communicate with God through my kneecap. I communicate with God through my brain. So when my brain is adversely affected, guess what else gets adversely affected? Everything else on earth according to my life. Every domain of my life. When this becomes negatively affected, everything that comes out of here and off the ends of these will also be negative. It's the reverse Midas touch. When this is healthy, this will be healthy, and these will be healthy. This creates the change for every part of a person. Not just neurobiologically. This is where we're so asphyxiated in our culture with calling it just a brain disease. No! There's a package that goes with it. Emotional and spiritual that now collapses those domains of my life. So we're only addressing addiction as disease model. And I see the value of the disease concept. We'll talk about that. But it can't just be that one thing. There's a whole spiritual component, an emotional and cognitive reasoning component that has to be addressed in accompaniment with things like Suboxone, methadone, Vivitrol. You've got to also be getting a tremendous level of developmental counsel. That's the problem. If you're not aware right now, the methodology of the nation is to address it purely as a life preservation. So we're only going to address it through an MAT model because the goal is to preserve life. And I get it, because we're losing 174 people a day. I get it. But we're stopping there. These ideas of long-term state license programs, you know, they're all going away. This government is never going to pay for them. I give another 5 years. They're all gone. The ones that are going to be left are your faith-based nonprofits who get no government funding, so we're doing it without their help. It's got, all three things have to be addressed, mind, body, and soul, if you want extraordinary wellness. So we have to be careful. But so what's happening in the brain is that when that person is being told to will away this manifestation, and we'd say it's the same as willing away histamine, we understand that it's not about willing away the symptoms. Here's the key word. The person has to use a level of willpower. Every decision I make in life requires my decision to make a willful decision. So certainly it's in there, but I can't will away the symptoms, but I can certainly make a willful decision under the right level of motivation, primarily through the family, to willfully, not wanting, but willfully enter treatment, to then address the manifestations. That's maybe some degree of willpower. So for you, the homework that I would give you if you want to take a chance on willing away symptoms, the best homework I can give you is I would like you to go home or go to your local pharmacy and buy a very large family-sized box of X-Lax, eat that entire box, and then will away what's going to happen next. While you're in the bathroom, I would challenge you as a person of faith to try to pray it away. This will be God's response to you. No, silly. That's an anatomical design. We don't change that. There has to be a change. No, I don't do that. You're where you should be according to that decision. Here's a better prayer for you. How about this prayer? Lord, help me stop eating an entire box of X-Lax. Not, Lord, help me to eat the X-Lax and not have the symptoms. And just help me to will those away. You see the difference? So the person who has a histamine nose doesn't will away the symptoms. He or she makes a willful decision to go to the allergy doctor, to go buy a box of decongestant from the local CVS, or maybe even better, to have enough wisdom to stop hanging out in pollen fields and start creating systems of care around their life. That's where the will comes into play, not in the symptoms. So the name of the book is We Didn't Raise Them This Way. Why do they behave this way? There's a number of reasons. The best word probably spiritually in the Bible is probably idolatry for addiction. Putting something in front of God as a place of ultimate concern. And we know from a spiritual perspective, I think it was Augustine who said, we become and are identified by what we worship. Oh! So for people in addiction, they become addicts, which is a terrible word. How about for the people who can't get out of the workplace? Workaholics. How about the guy who won't get out of the gym? Lunkhead. We are absolutely identified and will be labeled by society according to our ultimate concern. The thing that we worship and value most. There's no way around it. And so, with this, that person has decided they're going to worship drugs and alcohol, so they become that. Here is the neurobiological effect in the brain. It's a three-pack combination, but there's absolutely a measurable, scientifically measurable, pointing that can be studied and measured exactly the parts of the brain affected by the addiction. In the same way, we can take the cranial cap off, poke a place and my tongue sticks out. There's no argument against it. It's not a faith issue. It's absolute. That's what happens. We can measure the absolute science that shows how the drugs begin to alter the networking neurobiology of the brain. This is coming from a minister, so let me put that on top of that, where it's okay for us as Christians to understand this neurobiological effect without having to throw out the absolute spiritual condition from a faith-based perspective that we address first, because God is the creator of the brain. Not the doctors, not man, not the psychologist. We start from the one who created it. We have a wonderful manual to walk us through it in a Holy Spirit position that lives in us. Government proves that's the best model. And so, here's how it affects the brain, and this is why you didn't raise them this way. At some point, probably soon, if not already, you're going to experience a great emptiness right here. We call that hunger. When hunger goes to the body, it sends a message to the brain. It sends a neurotransmitter, but it does not go to the executive functioning, the optional part of the brain. What color socks to wear today? Black, red, or green. And if I show up at work and have a black and red sock on, I don't get extricated from the community, I don't get stoned to death, and I don't go to prison. So there's no real cost or consequence. It's all optional. Who cares what color socks? I think I wear 6 different socks on one foot and nothing on the other. No consequence. Optional. It's not where hunger goes. The message of hunger goes to a part of the brain designed by God, non-optional, the mandatory part of the brain, in the limbic system, responsible for fight, flight, and freeze, responsible for survival responses, non-optional, not looking for your opinion, brain taking over, you're going to go eat some food. So hunger comes to the brain, but this is what it sounds like to get the message very clear to the person who's hungry. When that message hits the brain, metaphorically, this is what it would sound like. Survive! Survive! And you notice in parentheses behind the word, the mandate to survive, right? If you don't, you will die. That's the message. It's a death message. It's a catastrophic message. Survive, survive. So when that message comes to the brain, it goes to the non-optional part of the brain, and we begin to respond. The message is so powerful that it will displace all optional thinking and reasoning. It will also displace good behavior and value systems, and we'll get there. So it's so powerful that you and I can be driving down the street, and up to this point, we've been talking about all the domains, right? That's all you can talk about as a human, and it's pretty much, for the most part, all optional dialogue. That time we went to the cabin when I was 12, all these things. And up to this point, I've been feeding the dialogue with you and having great discourse and adding to what you're saying and piggybacking. And now the survive message comes, and all I need you to do is be quiet. And so I begin to prompt you and all the nonverbal prompts. Because all I really want to do is wait for you to be silent, because in my brain is survive. I just want to turn to you and say, hungry, must seek food. And you also will hear 2 key words that will go to the survival part of your brain, built by your brain, hungry and food. And the survival part of your brain will begin to assess that need according to your physical anatomy. And you'll start thinking about all the stuff you're talking about is displaced from the brain. And you will turn to me and say, yes, yes, hungry must seek food. Guess the next 10 minutes the conversation is going to be. With no recollection of the old one. Where should we eat? Who to invite? I know what a great steak, lousy sushi, and Betty's pie. You'll have 10 minutes of talking about survival methodology. It will run the show. It's driving the truck. And so once you've determined where you're going to eat, you then may turn to your partner and say, what were we talking about? And no one will remember. You'll spend a couple of minutes trying to jog your memory. It has no value. It's a survival message. Who cares about it? Cat or something like that. You won't be able to think of it. And you know what you'll end up doing? Not being able to think of it. And guess what you'll go back to default to? Oh, I know this great steak. And you go right back to survival conversation. You've done it 1,000 times. So the next thing that comes to the brain, because that's only the first part of the loop. The loop has to be closed. You can't sit around in survival. So now you close the loop, you go eat. And so now you eat. The food goes into the mouth, begins to hit the belly, and stops being survived, and it starts to become success! Great job! And your brain says, do it again and again and again. Your brain says, we don't trust you. And when you and I were little boys and little girls, we had a little thing growing into our brain responsible for memory called the hippocampus. When the hippocampus was formed enough to be branded by your brain, it did. And so what your brain did, so that you will never forget to eat, and so I will never forget to eat, is it said, see this branding iron? We're going to put everything on here that has anything to do with survival by way of food. The word food, the word survive. Colors of food. What colors of food? Yes, look at all your fast food chains. Oranges, reds, yellows, all food colors. Very interesting. All the dessert places, blues and whites. Food. Your brain knows those as food. Isn't that interesting? All the smells of food are going to be on there. The word Burger King is going to be on there. Salt will be on there. And Betty's pie will be on there. And what's going to happen next is we are now, the brain says, you're going to burn that onto your hippocampus so that you never forget that when you feel hunger, it's mandatory, go eat. Get it done. And so, now it's 11 o'clock at night. We've had our 3 meals. There's no real reason to eat any more food, but it's 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, where all of the earth at that point is optional. It's all a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. Everything's coming into the brain, into all parts of the brain optional, all the television programming, the news report. I'm a wide open canvas for whatever may come next in my idle state of 11 o'clock on Sunday night, and guess what comes on that television? We've had our 3 meals. Matter of fact, we even represented all the food groups. Well done. Awesome job. But on the TV comes now, in this idle time of optional everything, that little Roman ruler with that little Caesar with his 72 pizzas for $1.74. And there it is, the melty cheese. And the smoke that's coming off the cheese, I smell it. Even though it's CGI created, it's computer generated, I still smell it. And there's the pepperoni the size of the 72-inch screen, glistening and popping and lovely. And all the triggers go off because they all represent survive. And I look to my friend and say, we should order a pizza. And they say, yes, we should. Any idea why? None at all. Survive. And we order a pizza 11 o'clock at night for no good reason and stuff it into the old pizza hole for no good reason. Triggers. Now we're talking about triggers. So now what I want you to do is I want you to understand, empirically proven, that the part of the brain affected by the cravings for drug and alcohol is not executive functioning. It goes to the exact same part of the brain that says survive. When I crave drugs and alcohol, the message to the brain is survive, non-optional. So why then do we do all these terrible behaviors? Well, because there's a survive message. So what do you mean? There's something in our culture we call the Heinz dilemma, or the moral dilemma, and it's been studied in natural circumstances because it's unethical to study it by design. But it's a study that indicates time and time again, and every time it's been observed without exception, that when a person is under conditions in which they can no longer meet their survival need, they will put their values on hold and create behaviors, no matter what the conditions, to survive. There's a starving man in the community, upright community member, maybe the pastor of the town, who's a wonderful father and husband, has never had a criminal record or any indiscretion in the town or with anyone in the town. But for whatever reason, despite his ability to feed his family in socially acceptable ways, he can't. They are starving. And guess what's right down the street? A little bakery, the lights are off, the rolls are in the window, and the glass is thin. The question that we ask the group of sociological students is, do people go in? Every single time, always. They break the glass and they get the bread. In some conditions, one person's life will be sacrificed and that person will be killed to feed the rest. We know killing's not good under these conditions, then we're going to have to make allowance for it. Same thing happens with survival in addiction. So they're not, your loved ones are not stealing your things because they're bad people. Matter of fact, we hate ourselves, and I'll explain to you why. And we're fully aware that it's not okay to be doing these. But we have done what the person in hunger does. We have displaced our value system in order to meet the need for survival and demand. And there's a spiritual component here of idolatry, which also begins to manifest in a person. So what that looks like is this. So now here I am, and I'm taking my grandmother's wedding ring to the pawn shop. And it's the last surviving emblem that my mother has of her mother. Maybe the most valued possession. but it's worth an enormous amount of money. I'm probably going to get maybe $100 from the pawn shop. But I'm taking it because inside my brain is survive. But here's what you have to understand. The addiction never actually kills the authentic Joel. This is the inauthentic Joel, the addicted Joel. The authentic Joel, who harbors all the shame and guilt, guess where that person is in the car? In the back seat. And guess what that person is screaming? Don't do this! This is going to kill your mother! What are you doing? And so in the front seat, the inauthentic Joel is survives. So shut up! Shut up! And you know how I shut him up? I get high. When I get high, I disassociate from reality. All the shame and guilt goes away. The voice is silenced. But here's the problem. In order to get high, I have to abandon my value system, hurt my relationships, and creates that voice. You see the circle? The more I get high, the more I hear that voice. The more I hear that voice, the more I want to get high. And this goes on and on and on for years and years and years. We hate ourselves. The impression of people in addiction is somehow like they're having a great old time while everybody else is working. I never worked so hard in my life. There's nothing more trialsome, burdensome, or laborious than living your life outside of your own value system. Nothing. I can't even find that level of idolatry in the Bible. We even poison our own body. I can't find that even in the Bible. Hideous. So we live outside of our own value system. So here's some more homework for you. Please don't do this or we could go to court. But if you wanted to understand what it means to live outside of your own value system, here's what I'd like you to do for the next 2 weeks. Lie to everyone you know to make sure that whatever you do, you're always in the advantaged position, even if it means lying and manipulating. Always ensure your own pleasure under any conditions. The key of addiction is never experiencing hard or unfavorable feelings. We turned that switch off years ago. We can't stub our toe without getting high. If we have an argument at work and we can't get high, you know how we feel better? We go to the break room, call the dealer, and set up a meeting for 5 hours later, and we're satisfied enough now, because we're going to get high later, to go back and apologize. That's the way it works. We cannot experience any hard emotion. So lie to everyone, ensure your pleasure all the time. Cheat on everyone you're with intimately. If that opportunity comes, you take it. There's very little you're grasping to that even comes close to that level of pleasure. You're never going to miss that. So forget all your intimate commitments. Those are done. Neglect everyone that you love and value. Try to be, as much as you can, emotionally and physically unavailable for the funerals and the weddings. Because remember we said earlier, you can't go there and really be high and not experience some level of rejection or guilt or shame. So you're not going to any of those. Your daughter's wedding, sorry, I can't make it. You'll have to make up some kind of excuse. Make sure you do this. And funerals, my God, no, I'm not going to a funeral. That's all my shame and guilt in that little bucket. I'm not going there. And these Christian weddings with no alcohol, not a chance. And so I'm not going to any of those things, so neither are you. So you can't go to anything that requires your intimate level of connection to anyone. You have to abandon all those. Every environment for the next 2 weeks you need to walk into, including like your pastor's office, your grandmother's house, your workplace, and survey every environment for what can go out the door with you. Anything that you think can be redeemed for cash or drugs has to leave that place with you. Plot plans if you have to and break in later. Whatever you have to do. Pastor's office, your mother, whatever it is. That you have to survey your environment to get everything out. Steal toilet paper from your workplace. Who can afford toilet paper? But a man needs toilet paper. So just steal it. Right? Who's got money for toilet paper? So make sure you're stocking up on toilet paper and other people's expense. And then the last one is abandon your hygiene. If the shower is behind doors where there are people that can tell you they don't like the way you're behaving, there are no showers that week. Sometimes we're gone for a week at a time. Brushing our teeth. You won't even remember the last time a toothbrush hit your mouth. Who's got money for toothbrushes and toothpaste? I'm lucky to eat peanut butter off a spoon for a week. And so, abandon all that. I want you to do this now for the next 2 weeks. The only reason you won't want to take your own life in those 2 weeks is because I told you, you can be done in 2 weeks. In addiction, we see death as freedom. When you read the paper about people that OD, you understand in the subculture of addiction, all the people that party with them are toasting their needles saying they're free. We see it as an accomplishment and a place of freedom. We in the culture of addiction don't see it as something negative. We say that's the nature of the beast, at least he's out. We hate ourselves. There's no part of it at any point, other than maybe the first summer when you first started getting high, is enjoyable. After that, all the relationships start to get involved. You start shaming, blaming, guilting everyone you know. You start to become the identified patient of the family. It's loathsome. There's nothing enjoyable about it. This is why we didn't raise them this way. We didn't raise them this way. We didn't raise them this way. So here's what I'd also say to that. If you believe that somehow you created your addicted loved one, would you say that there has ever been a set of parents in their best effort who has done everything right or everything wrong? Probably not, right? Sometimes we do some things we wish we would have done some. There's no perfect set of parents. None. So why aren't all of our children addicted? We all experience the same different kinds of levels of conflict. There's plenty of families that have the same conflict as us, but their children can get addicted. Why? Well, maybe it's not just about a parenting decision and the things that happen in our lives. Every human being that exits their mother's womb into conflict. That's what they come into, as well as all the wonderful, lovely things of enrichment, fulfillment, and lots of wonderful things. But also conflict. Behind every tree of conflict is more conflict. So every human being makes a willful decision at some point in life, educated, uneducated, resourced or not resourced, whatever it is, they make a willful decision to decide, this is now how I see best fits the coping strategy for this situation. Some do it in healthy ways, and even they don't do it consistently, because lessons have to be learned by doing things the wrong way. So nobody even does that perfectly healthily. But some of us have a perfect path of doing it in an unhealthy way. Medicating. We decide, I'm not going to experience this emotional regulation for one day longer, and I discovered when I smoked marijuana for the first time at the age of 8, that stops. And I say, wow, there is a reason to live. I don't have to deal with those emotional dysregulation of my schizophrenic mother and my alcoholic father, right? So I have now a coping strategy. Some cope in other ways. Those are workaholics, the guys who can't get out of the gym. That's all escapism and coping in excessive and obsessive ways, because they're still going to lose balance. So every person, regardless of your parenting, which is going to include families riddled with conflict of all different sizes and shape, abuses, molestations, car accidents, untimely death, every family is going to experience a level of conflict, and every person has to make decisions at whatever point in their life how they're going to decide to do it. Some are more relegated to poor decisions than others, but the fact remains that that person has to make that decision to make that happen. Nobody makes anyone else's decision for them, and everyone is under conditions of conflict walking around on the planet Earth. If we believe that by becoming Christians or getting into long-term recovery that we're not going to experience conflict, the Earth is not going to be a good home for us, because it is riddled with conflict. And it's also riddled with wonderful things. So, and if we're thinking that addiction is a bad parenting thing, we have to also a child, despite the way we raise them, has an independent life and complexity to either follow the will that we have for their life, which is kind of a funny thing to say, other than maybe hoping they follow the Lord if you're a person of faith. But they have the option at any point to abandon that completely. My father raised me as much as he could under the most ethical conditions. He was a revered member of our town and all of that before things started coming undone. And I became a punk rocker in the early 80s. My father taught me about equal equality and a person of every different color in our home all the time, because he worked as a teacher under urban places. Despite his best effort, punk rock had me hanging upside down crosses and swastikas in my bedroom. Not because I believed in any of it. I wanted to be disruptive and rebellious. And he invited his Jewish boss over to come see my room and forgot I had swastikas on. So you can imagine that conversation went. So despite my father's best effort to be this wonderful, successful man, which he was, I made my own willful decisions. Years and years later, I've come back to those, right? Thank God. So if parenting includes children with willful decisions, well, here's some relief for you. Do you know what parent had the first set of rebellious and unruly children? God. If God can have unruly and obscenely willful children even in a moment of time, so can we. Was God then a bad parent? Matter of fact, we understand him as the perfect parent who understood perfectly that he's not responsible and had to give free will to his children in order for there to be real love and relationship. It had to include choice. So does our parenting. We cannot own the choices of our children as the mistakes we made. No parent is doing it right completely all the time. All parenting, I don't care how many books we read as parents, When the rubber hits the road, it's when that little life is in your arms. And you begin to hope some of that stuff carries over. And we do the best we can do. And we hope then for the best. And the advantage we have as Christians is that we have a deliberating and delegating source that gives us the relief in the times in which our natural inadequacies show up and His perfection delivers. And sometimes it's just dealing with hard times and wishing maybe we did something a little different. And so this is where we're at with this. And this is all in the book. This is what it talks about to get families understanding. It's not an issue of how we raise them. There's a lot more at play than that because every family is going to experience some level of hardship that at any moment could inspire that person to want to use drugs to get through it. Anytime. So how do we understand why people use? Bio, psycho, social, spiritual. So in other words, every domain that affects their life could influence using. Biological, sociological, psychological, and spiritual factors is how we coin why a person picks up. Try putting a stethoscope on that. And so moving through that, we'll get back to this. That's where we begin. So let's talk a little bit about enabling. Enabling. It's such a clinical word. Let's throw out the word enabling and let's just use the word overprotective. Because that's what it is. So it almost sounds like an oxymoron, right? Joel, you protect people too much. That would make me a superhero. I should have a cape. Are you kidding me? How can I protect somebody too much? But when somebody tells you, especially as a parent, that you're being overprotected, is it a compliment? No. It's saying that you're doing something wrong. So what it's basically saying is that while there is a time, under unnatural sometimes conditions, to keep a person from natural consequences and through hardship and discomfort, what we also understand is there's a time to allow people to experience some natural discomfort because it causes them to grow. You know, as parents, if the school let us, we'd probably spend grades 1 through 3 with our kids in the classroom. That first time going on that bus, you're going to rip your head off. You can't believe it. Watching your kid leave, you don't even know if you're ever going to see him again. It's the most horrendous thing in the world. And so we have a natural tendency to grab one very tightly, but we understand that we have to be able to start creating some distance. We're umbilically tethered to our parent when we exit their womb. The reason they cut that umbilical cord is because that person, by natural conditions, will exit the earth before me, and I can't go with them where they're going. I have to continue to live. The goal of a Christian home and a Christian family is to reattach the umbilical cord to God. And that should be who carries me through, and that's what He pulls me up by at the end. Right? And so, enabling the action that someone takes to protect the person with the problem from the consequences of their action. Anything that stands in the way of a person's experiencing the natural consequences of their own behavior. Pain motivates change. Hard reality breaks through the denial and delusion of the person in addiction. When we rescue a loved one from the painful consequences of irresponsible decisions, we often block or slow down their motivation for change. We're taking away the motivator. And so Chuck Swindoll said, pain plants the flag of reality in the fortress of a rebel heart. And so even though it's not inherently just a rebellious issue per se, from a spiritual perspective, you could say that's in there. It's a condition. It's somebody who is willfully choosing not to do the next right course of action that speaks to a lifestyle as opposed to a death style. So he's saying that pain often creates that awareness. And so it's so true. Enabling is a tricky thing because there's all kinds of ways that we enable. Here's some types right here. Making excuses, it's just a phase. Rescuing them, bailing them out of jail, paying the bills, covering for them, calling employers, hiding the truth, even from family and friends. Crazy stuff, man. I've had done interventions and we say, well, invite the family. And they have like 12 people in their family, but only the parents know and are keeping it a secret. You know the old expression, right? We're only as sick as our secrets. That's the nature of addiction. The nature of addiction is to isolate and silence the voice against it. And the crux to change is acceptance and self-honesty. Right? That's the polar opposite of bringing about the change. Getting levels of acceptance. This is our truth, whether we like it or not, and self-honesty about my role in this situation, whether the person addicted or the family member. And then it goes into denial, which is a true condition, and then rationalizing, at least we're not as bad as so-and-so, right? I know this one guy, he's really bad. My son's not as bad, or daughter's not as bad. And then the other one is if I ignore it, maybe it'll just go away, which is kind of like it's just a phase kind of thing. And eventually, you know, these things do not serve to bring about the change. They actually prolong the ability for change. And then families continue to get sicker and sicker. And we fall into this place of denial, defined as a false system of beliefs that are not based on reality, which begin to create in the brain of the person a self-protecting behavior that keeps us from honestly facing the truth. No one wants to believe they have an addicted person. The brain will defend that reality all day long. That seems like too much to deal with. The people in addiction don't want to believe they're addicted. No one wants to ever believe anything bad about anything, especially about ourselves. And when we have addicted loved ones, it is really an extension of ourselves, especially a child. And so we don't want to believe bad things about ourselves. When's the last time somebody came up to you and said, listen, Joel, I really got to talk to you. It might be hard to hear, but you're sometimes really selfish. Our response is, very interesting. Please tell me more. I think this could be a growth moment. Generally, our response, you have to get to that place, and that's done by discipline, not by natural emotional orientation. You have to override the emotional response and have a disciplined, communicative answer to be able to do that. Because the emotions are to defend. And say, are you mad at me? What's the matter with you? What about the time you did this? Man, displacement, projection, everything. We don't receive that. Nobody wants to believe anything bad about themselves. And so we start to create all kinds of systems to not have to believe bad things about ourselves. The story that you know from Aesop's fables that talks about denial, or another word would be cognitive dissonance, not wanting to believe the reality. And look that up sometime. It's a very interesting study, cognitive dissonance, because there's dissonance where we finally level out. What's the opposite? Not dissonance. But it's a stasis. It's a place of stasis and balance, but then there's dissonance. And so it's the fox and the grapes. It's a story of the fox who goes through the woods and he's hungry. This is written by Aesop. I mean, this is ages ago. And this fox comes to a tree, and up in the trees there's a vine of grapes, and he's very hungry. But despite his best effort, he can't get up there to those grapes. So how does he resolve the cognitive dissonance that they're right there? They would fill his belly. How is he possibly going to walk away? He should sit there and die there and hope maybe one drops. But he's got to be able to walk away because he's come to the reality that you can't have them. But that's a hard reality to have, so there's only one way to walk away. Those grapes, they're sour anyway. So he has to lie to himself. There's an alternative. And the alternative is to come to acceptance. Even though they're there, I can't have them. Now that I have to go, I focus on what's next. Hard for families. Very hard. Very hard for the person using it. So what's enabling versus supporting? I chose the wrong font color, so I'm going to read these to you. Enabling versus supporting. So it's a very simple thing. Enabling is doing for others what they should be and are capable of doing on their own. That doesn't mean an addiction. I mean enabling. I don't care if the person's addicted or not. Sometimes we enable our children and nothing to do with addiction. We keep bailing them out of everything. We never let them grow and learn. And wonder when they're older, at 55, they can't make a dentist appointment. So we just keep doing it. My gosh, we're constantly a parent the rest of our lives. So much for that swan song freedom part of our life. We created children our entire lives. It's love gone wrong. And so in addiction, enabling is supporting decisions for death. That's what it is. You have shown no evidence of change, but I keep handing you money and paying your bills. So supporting is doing for others what they are not capable at that point in their life, for whatever reason, for doing for themselves, in healthy ways. So this supports a decision for life. So a person who wants a person to come into my program, Revelations of Freedom, finally makes a decision to no longer enable their loved one, which creates consequences and pain, wonderful, and motivates their decision to come in. So then the family says to me, well, how do we make sure we don't enable them when they leave? They've just made a decision for life. They completed our program. To whatever degree you can do it within your means, not beyond if necessary, support their next decision. If you want to put up the money for their halfway house, put it up. Don't put it in their hands. That's called wisdom. Put it in the hands of the landlord. But you can continue to support decisions for life. They just evidence a year in our program is a decision for life. Support it to the means of which you can. And then you get to decide what you give them and don't give them. Because another thing that parents forget. The moment in which your child is no longer specifically by state order under your care or governmental care, you understand that you will go into heaven as fluidly as you want if you never gave them another gift ever. You're not obligated as an adult to ever give any other human being any gift ever according to God. You're not going to be held at disadvantage because you didn't buy somebody a Christmas present. This is a misconception. So what happens is families start to feel an unhealthy level of obligation because of their role, that they've got to be the benefactor for every next one. You do not. We're not obligated to give anything to anyone. If we do it, it happens as a result of just an indwelling level of benevolence and care and love for them. But if it's coming from a place of obligation, we need to evaluate that and throw that under a microscope. That's a yucky way to give, don't you think? I only want to give what's the condition of my heart. I don't want to be. My father calls Christmas giftmas. See the point? It's this obligatory exchange where we throw gifts at each other and then we go get a cheese sandwich. I mean, it's nuts. So we have to, even at Christmas, your next Christmas, internalize the activity. Internalize it and say to somebody, you know what, I'm giving you this. Because yes, this holiday gives us this opportunity, but I'm giving you this because I appreciate you so much. Because as far as I'm concerned, all of our life is a certain level of Christmas. And so owning that and taking ownership for that level of giving. So supporting is, again, supporting decisions for life. So here we go. Now I'm going to get a little philosophical with you. I'm not here to necessarily change your theology or philosophy of unconditional love, but, honestly, I'm here to poke at it. And so here's how I'm going to poke at it. Unconditional love, this is the love and prayer for our loved ones. Here's the key. No matter what choices they're making. As we do not own or take credit for our loved ones or anyone's choices. They make their own choices, I make mine. So because of that, there are no conditions or rules for my ability to love and pray for my loved ones. So if my wife goes on to be the most homicidal maniac ever known to the planet, it's going to change the condition of a relationship, but it does not have the power to change my affect of love and prayer for her. Because here's why. No one gets to choose who I love, except for me. And it's a choice. I get to love whatever I want to love. No one gives me permission. I'm not asking for anyone's permission. I have the power to love my enemies who'd like to curse me to the pig. They don't own my MO. I get to love and pray for whoever I want. So what am I saying? It's not based on behaviors. It's a choice that I'm making to love somebody beyond their behaviors. So the behaviors do not determine my ability to love or pray for you. So I would continue to pray for the people I love and maybe even occasionally visit them in prison. It will change the dynamic of the relationship because of those behaviors. But my ability to love and pray for someone is not decided by conditions. It's really decided, especially if you're a person of faith and from a Christian perspective, it's designed for a relationship greater than the things of earth that give me the power, the reasoning, and the purpose for that love, which is something we need. We need help with our love. We really do. We desperately need help to quantify and qualify our love. Desperately. Because we're all over the place in our emotions. My goodness. You know what the greatest signs of emotional immaturity is? One of the greatest signs of emotional immaturity that I've witnessed, we see in our program all the time, because we get 18-year-old, 36-year-olds emotionally. You're only as good as the last interaction. It's an absolute sign of emotional immaturity. You'll see it in your children. So one day you ask coming to me and I'm your dad and I give you an apple. So everybody you talk to, Dad's great, love Dad. An hour later you ask me for a piece of candy and I say no. Dad's a jerk. Dad's such a jerk. You're only as good as the last interaction. Our emotions are a mess. The assessment of that human's value in our life has to be more than those emotional moments. It has to be a collective view of what that person is in our life. And sometimes you have to look well beyond past experience to get there. Tough, right? But that's like this aerial view of duty of love, and naturally, in my opinion, we're incapable of it. Not with a level of consistency and predictability without God's love. And so here's the key, though. So where there's no rules for love, there's absolutely rules for relationship. And this is where we get lost as parents. There are absolutely rules for relationship, and we hold people according to those rules. Here's the first rule. The first rule of being in a relationship with me is I have to trust you. I know I'm a weirdo. Of course I do. I don't want to be in an elevator for 10 minutes with a person I don't trust, let alone have them living in my home. I have to be able to trust you. Where there is no trust, in my opinion, there is no relationship. Not technically, not by definition. When the trust has been defiled, what exists is the historical reference and remembrance of a love once between you and I based on trust that is now hanging by a thread in the hope that we'll rebuild it. But it is no longer a relationship. A relationship is two people who have communed together in an obligation of love and respect for one another with the intention to grow and build one another for the purposes of life. When a person defiles the trust by betrayal, by deception, by thievery, things like this, it now alters the state of the relationship. No trust, no relationship. So it's an enormously big task for families when they're coming into rehabilitative circles to understand the first thing that we're really here to do. Certainly we're addressing the manifestations of the addiction and that process, but as a family unit, we're addressing issues of trust. And are we going to get there? Every counseling session, whether saying the word trust or not, will be based on establishing trust. Every single one of them. Because no trust, no safety. No safety, no vulnerability. No vulnerability, no relationship. All relationships require a level of risk and vulnerability because it creates intimacy. That intimacy and that trust then creates the bridge to run every other aspect of my life down. The things I'm afraid of, the things I'm ashamed of, the things I'm passionate about. It creates the bridge to have that level of relationship. The trust is the bridge because it creates security. Our entire lives as human beings are based on security. Look up words like security, strong tower in the Bible. God is constantly reminding his children, because he needs to, that he is the security. Why? Because we most often feel some level of insecurity. From the moment we exit our mother's wombs, crying for the security now lost in the womb, that's what the tears are based on. I've lost my security. This is new. I'm without the thing that was keeping me safe and normal. And now I'm going to be crying for security the rest of my life. The rest of my life. Every relationship you're in that has a level of intimacy is there because you feel secure with that person. Security is a powerful thing. It's an amazing thing how we need this in the context of restoring these relationships. Every morning when you wake up in your home, without your permission, your brain, when those eyes open, immediately assesses your surroundings for familiarity. Familiarity means safety. Then the shoes and socks go on. You're not even conscious that you're doing that. But that's the first assessment. Am I safe? Am I well? If you come out of a lifestyle of addiction, you'll have learned very clearly there's many times you open those eyes, and it is not a safe environment. How did I get here? Who are you? So safety is a major driving component of what creates and allows for relationships. So when trust comes out, there is no relationship. So one of the rules of my relationship is I have to trust you. If relationships don't have rules, well then who needs the 10 Commandments? Oh, wait a minute, those are with God. So there's rules in the relationship with God. Yes, not in the legalistic sense. Matter of fact, the rules when the relationship is applied are almost seamless. There's all these rules with my wife. They're seamless. We don't have to rehearse them and challenge them every day and read a list. They're not on tablets. They're seamless. But they are the conditions for the relationship. Half the reason, well, I said in the beginning, if you remember, people don't want to come into programs that are faith-based as non-believers, is they recognize they have to give up the empowerment as the rule maker and come under rules. What we're trying to do is get them to understand that the rules promote life, and it's the essential and original design for your life to be in that relationship, which makes the rules effortless and seamless. It's not a legalistic, it's not religion, it's relationship. And unfortunately, many see it as religion. It's not religion. And so, but getting there is hard. It doesn't happen overnight for many of us, whether we come out of an addiction or not, just finding our way to that trust relationship. So these other things, honesty, respect, faithfulness. If there is no need for relationship rules, who needs marriage vows? I should be able to cheat on my wife. She should just suck it up and we move on. The moment I would do something horrendous like that, she is absolutely, by permission of God, and obligated to do so, is to challenge me on the betrayal of trust in the relationship. When my wife challenges me on the relationship rules of our marriage, as would maybe my best friend, maybe even a good employer, when they're challenging me, especially from a faith position, my wife is not challenging me on the relationship rules as her first motive to preserve her happiness or our marriage. Her obligation from a Christian perspective is when she holds me responsible for these relationship rules, she's making an effort to preserve my soul, not only for eternity, but even on earth. If I can defile one of the most intimate relationships in my life, marriage being the highest, then you're all in great danger of me. If I can compromise the intimacy with my wife, you're going to need a great level of care and distance for this guy. Because that means I'm going to do it with you. Taxes, I'm checking every box. I don't care if I deserve it or not. Every part of my life will begin to become that compromise. When my wife is holding me accountable and I'm holding someone accountable, the motive is that I'm believing in that moment, that I'm helping to preserve your soul. It's not fair to say to some degree that I don't have some advantage in the relationship, because by default it's going to benefit our ability to continue to move on, and it's also going to do what for me? It's going to help to ensure safety. Because if I can't have it with you, whether I'm preserving your soul or not, I'm out. I'm out. So you start making a decision to also build back the trust. So I'm never one to advocate for divorce, nor would I attempt to challenge that theology. But I am an advocate for separation. Only under the conditions by which a person is unwilling to make changes that are becoming caustic to the other party, who is the victim or the receiving party of the behavior. There is a time, the Bible says there's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. What do we think that means? There's a time in which we have to let things alone and separate from that which causes us danger. Again, I'm not saying that it has to be a final commitment to divorce, but there's certainly a call for safety. And so relationships have to have rules. Here's the biblical extraction. So reading the Bible, here's the phrase that can be extracted biblically. Rules without relationship equal rebellion. Relationships without rules equals rebellion. Come undone. So if I'm even as a leader in my organization and I'm leading as executive director, I can certainly lead through power and intimidation. If you can suck it up and figure out what you want to do next. So I'm going to still be at this desk while you're rolling out. But I understand that even though I have the power, in order to bring about the greatest result in our relationship is going to happen by understanding it as a relationship. Understanding that I have to be able to apply relationship to the rules of the organization. When your individuals come into our programs, Team Challenge and RFM, this is what we're teaching them. That in all relationships, although there's an enormous level of love and grace, an effort of love and grace comes in the form of accountability and truth. My obligation to you, if I love you, is to help you to recognize where there needs to be levels of accountability. And then doing what? Holding you accountable. Because I won't enable you, and I don't want to be enabled. So truth and love, right? That's the expression we often hear, and this is what we're saying to our loved ones when we recognize they're in addiction. We're so afraid to have these conversations. It's truth in love. It's not truth to offend or to hurt. You have to be careful, because you might be addressing them out of a hurt place. We've got to be able to regulate our emotions so that we can communicate the level of care. But if we operate out of feeling betrayed or hurt by them, it's going to very much skew the message. So we have to sometimes you have to pray with others before you ever have that meeting. But the truth and love, here's a great metaphor, and certainly this is a teen challenge thing, that always teen challenge guys. You always hear this expression. There's a great author, he was a theologian, I think 17th century, named William Arnott. William Arnott breaks down the Proverbs. He has a book called Lessons from Heaven for Life on Earth. I read, of course, this book every day. It's this fat. I read it through like 3 times. You get something new every time. I highly recommend it. His writing is so eloquent. He's so metaphorical. Sometimes I need another book to understand what he's saying. And some of those things he gets too contextual. But he said this. He said, if you want to know how to get a picture for truth and love, imagine it like a velvet glove that goes over an iron hand. The velvet is the love, but the truth is iron and on the inside. So the goal for us as believers and as people is to be asking God every day to work on my ratio. Too much love is an enabler. Too much truth is legalistic and a taskmaster, a tyrant. Finding that great ratio in my next conversation with every person I care about that I have to have a hard conversation with. Now, because of that metaphor, that's directly how I pray to God. Lord, help me with the ratio. Help me with the ratio, because I cannot be over or under either if I expect to really penetrate this issue. And so it's a good metaphor, and I think you would agree. It makes just such good sense. So here's the enabling questions that we ask families, and we're closing now. The help that you've been giving, is it actually helping? Is your loved one changing? Look at their actions. Is there clear evidence of your loved one becoming a responsible person? But whatever methodology you're using that does not apply non-enabling tactics, accountability, and maybe even intervention. Or is your loved one continuing down the path to destruction? So, in essence, here's what I would say. Let's say that life and accomplishment and success is chocolate cake. It's pulling chocolate cake out of the oven with your loved one, with a challenging point of your life. But every time 2, 5, 10, 15 years later, going to the oven, despite my best effort for chocolate cake, but no, again. Same results, same madness, over and over. So it's pretty simple. If I want chocolate cake to come out of that oven, I'm going to have to stop using vanilla cake ingredients. So what am I saying to you? What I'm basically saying to you is this entire presentation today is a baking class on how to make chocolate cake. You can decide if the ingredients that I used is how you want to take a chance on pulling chocolate cake out of the oven. I'm not here to make you do anything. What you've done is you've given me the privilege and honor to share with you some expanded thought to give you the time to evaluate, to make whatever decisions you need to make. Because I can't make your decisions for you, and I would never impose them on you. So this is just an opportunity for you to evaluate the things we talked about against, if you've noticed, if you've been a savvy listener, you've heard on several accounts that we're not even talking about addiction. Isn't that interesting? We really just talked about humanity and interplay between healthy relationships. Because it all applies to addiction, because addiction, that's what it comes out to destroy, is relationships. To the man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror, to the family, and to God. That's its designed to isolate and conquer. It's the only affliction that tells the afflicted that they don't have affliction. Pretty scary, right? This is the only affliction that we know of that can be studied where the message told to the person being afflicted, you don't have affliction. It's an old adage that says the best lie Satan ever told us is he doesn't exist. Right? So here's the last slide, just some changes, how to start changing behaviors in different places. Al-Anon is the creator of the 3 C's. You cannot cause, you cannot control, you cannot cure your loved one's addiction. That comes out of Al-Anon. Great group. Listen, they're going to say higher power because it's open to all religions. If you're a person that has Jesus as your foundation, which probably most here, and in your mind just dug in Jesus when they say higher power, because they're all biblically sound principles, every one of them. And they can all be returned to Scripture, like point to point. It's amazing. CODA is Codependence Anonymous. Celebrate Recovery is specifically, lack of a better word, it's kind of a Christian AA or NA. It's a little different than that in its orientation, the way it's set up. But they're great. Find them. They're all in place. You can punch in any one of these and your zip code, and it will give you the directory of where they are. They're everywhere. If you're in a relationship with an addicted person, or maybe been in addiction and not seeking a level of support, reach out for these. Now, Al-Anon is just for the families. It's not for the people in addiction because it's an environment designed to be safe. So back to safety. So that families can speak honestly without feeling coercion from their addicted loved one, who might re-edit and manipulate their statements. And so the treatment program, then the last slide talks about intervention. My wife and I are both professional interventionists. We travel the country, primarily the state, of course. And we've seen just a remarkable change in how it affects people's lives. And there's just some things that we're going to talk about it. An intervention is a success, even if the addicted person refuses to go to rehab on the first meeting, because at least the family has united to set a boundary. This means life will not be the same for the addicted, and a process is started that will commonly result in the addicted getting treatment. And that is when the total family really begins. But hear what I'm saying. We've been talking about addiction. This last statement I'm going to make. We've been talking about addiction, but here's what I hope you took away. As a family member, this is my prayer and hope for you. My hope for you is that you understand that regardless of the choices of your addicted loved one, you are obligated to create wellness for yourself, independent of whatever choices they make to get you out of the obsession. The obsession says, I can't be well unless they're well. That's a lie from the pit. My prayer for you is that you as a family get to such a place of health and wellness that you are able to return to a healthy lifestyle, whether your person is making great choices in their addiction or lousy choices. You're going to live your life to the fruition and potential and call that God has on your life that in no way can be disabled by the choice of another human being, regardless of the dynamic of the relationship. Because the first relation from a Christian MO is before I'm anybody's husband, wife, son, or daughter, I'm first somebody's son, and that's the primary relationship that no man or person can cause me to abandon under any conditions. None. So again, in my book, as much influence principle as we can use in a person's life without owning their decision. So how do I get better at influence principle? I have an hour commute every morning into work with no radio on. You know what most of that time is? Lord, you are the resource of influence. I would like to have more of that today. I would like to have more influence in the people I love to deter bad decision making. Here's a couple examples I need help with. And to influence good decision making. Here's a couple examples. And that's a good portion of that ride. Asking for more. I'm not going to find it in some place in myself. I've got to get it front loaded. So I need God to give me more and more and more influence to impact lives. Because I believe that's what we're here to do. In my opinion, success on earth is fulfilling all of our relationships to the best of our ability as God sees fit. That success formula for me, personally, and I'm not saying it's yours, but for me it's never failed me. Fulfilling all of our relationships to the best of our ability as God would see fit. No harm can come from that. So I want to close. We are at the marker. Brian, we might have a couple minutes for questions. I'm not sure I know it is lunchtime. I will be at my table if you want to talk to us. That's the end of my training. I'll have my book. We can talk. I notice a lot of times when I say, is there any questions? I don't get many. You know where I get a lot of them? Privately at the table. It's a stigmatic issue. We're not real big on talking about alcohol yet. We'll get there. And I get it. No harm, no foul. I get it. So if you need to talk to me more intimately or privately, I'll have my table. Maybe we can bounce them out. Okay? But I will answer a couple questions. If you need to go, you can go. I won't be offended if you want to. Go ahead. I'm going to give you this. There you go. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anything at all. Anybody, I will give you the money. Oh, that's not intimidating. The one who prayers it. All right, Father God, I thank you for this group, Lord, as you hand-selected and appointed, Lord. I pray a special blessing over their life, that they continue to move through this day, Lord, of education, enlightenment, empowerment, that I hope for each of them, Lord, inspires another level of freedom and a sense of knowing that's greater than feeling. And Lord, I pray that it's applicatory, that they can come away and actually put these things to practice, that these things are usable primarily, Lord, to glorify you. But I know you love your kids. It's also to benefit our lives, Lord, and to help us to be more functional for one another, more loving, more caring, more empowered, Lord. So I pray that over each life, Lord, as we go. Please, Lord, bless this meal. Bless it to our bodies, Lord, for the purposes of heaven and earth. And Lord, just bless this time to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys. See you at lunch.